Have you ever found yourself having to explain and justify your pricing to prospects? In this video, I'm going to share how you can sell for higher amounts by just changing how you present your prices. Now, I've personally sold everything from cheap $1 to $5 goods to over $50,000 a month high-end services to $400,000 software. So the way that I show pricing to customers means that I sell more for better margins. And I'm going to give you two case studies at the end, but here's what you need to understand first. That explaining and justifying your prices undermines your positioning and gives all the power to your prospect. Explaining your pricing means that you misunderstand buyer psychology. People don't buy based on a logical weighing of pricing methodology. Now, we wish that were true, that we could just logically tell them, well, this is good for you and you should buy this. It doesn't work that way. So let's look at two things. First, why prospects are asking about pricing. And second, how to sidestep that discussion entirely and sell for premium prices. So first of all, why are prospects drilling into your pricing? That's an important question. Now, it begins because you don't own the conversation. That is, the power dynamic of the sale between yourself and the prospect has control. And that means when they have control, that means that you have to justify your offer to them. And once that prospect feels like they're in control of the sales situation, they can push you to explain your pricing, either subtly or obviously. And it could be unconscious on their part, but it's definitely happening. If they feel like they have control, they're making you justify why your pricing is what it is. And then you're going to start to feel that power dynamic, and you're going to feel like you don't have control over it, and you're going to start negotiating yourself down. The other thing they might do, and you might have experience this if you're selling, they'll drill down into the details of the pricing. And this is a way to avoid a real discussion on the results that you'll get to them, but they're going to start drilling down, well, why is this priced this way? They'll ask you to justify it. And because pricing discussions, they seem objective, it seems like, oh, this should be some truth to it. Even if they really aren't the driving factor for the purchase, if they start to drill in, if the prospect starts to drill down on that, you're already in a losing battle. So the fact of the matter is, a purchase decision is made emotionally and often before the sales call even happens. And by opening up that doubt in their logical minds with the price justification, all you could be doing is actually unselling the prospect. They could have come to that call. They could have come to your sales call prepared to buy. And because you start that negotiation, they actually unsell themselves. So this means that you should head off ever getting into that discussion. You shouldn't even get near the discussion of why your prices are the way they are. Wait a second though. If I'm talking about why my price is what it is, what should I be talking about? That's the logical question that I ask myself. Well, I keep on doing this again and again. I'm talking about why my prices are the way they are. That's not working. What should I do instead? How should I take that conversation? And that's what I'm going to give you next here. You should be talking about what really matters to the prospect, and that is the results that they're going to get. So when I switched from here's why the price is the way it is to talking about them and the results that they're going to get, that was a pretty radical shift in me getting better results in a selling context. So what you want to talk about is why they're really buying, the value of what you're giving, and is that value greater than what you're charging? And that's a much simpler discussion. It doesn't really matter what you charge. What matters is the value that you're giving greater than what you charge? So if you instead let that conversation veer into items of price, like little line items of price, you've lost control of the big picture, because now it's justifying their bottoms up process of, is this actually adding up based on your costs? And that's the wrong way to think about it. You get your price elasticity from their value, not from your costs. In other words, by asking, is the value high enough? And are you charging less than that? You're going to make a lot more money than adding up all of your costs and presenting a price that way. So here's an example. Think about a super expensive restaurant, and they don't stop at you at the door and start justifying why their steak costs $200. The pricing of the steak alone communicates exclusivity. It communicates quality. You are assuming that it's going to be good because it is expensive, and the value to you of that dining experience is worth the $200. And that's why you're doing it. The same steak might cost a quarter of that at a restaurant down the road, but it costs $200 here, and you're willing to pay because of the context, the value to you. There's this perception that things that cost more must be better, and you should use that perception. So unless you're competing on being the budget option or a commodity, you really can price at the higher end of your niche by presenting it on a value basis instead of a cost basis. Those higher prices, they're going to help you attract premium clients who value themselves. They value their time, and that importantly leads to a better client. And when you don't budge on price, it also tells the customer something pretty important, that you have the power to say no. Now, particularly when you're selling anything in services, that's really important that the prospect understand that you have the power to say no. It's not just them choosing you. It is you saying they get to be a client. And because you're comfortable saying no, and because you're confident in the value you deliver, you can get that pricing. So all of this confidence increases the odds that you're going to get the pricing that you want, and you're going to get them results because they'll be invested in that. So before we wrap up, I've got 2 case studies that show how this works for both products and for services. So no matter what you're selling, you'll be able to deploy this. So the first one, in my agency, I went from justifying these low fees line by line. I started out at a really low budget, presuming incorrectly that I had to start out low and then gradually grow my fees over time. So I started out and I had to justify line by line because I was doing this bottoms up thing that I talked about earlier. I was saying that, I have to look at all my costs and then I can get a little profit on my costs. And so I went from that, and what I changed it to is really I'm bringing huge value. I'm getting these clients results. So I essentially doubled my fees and I started framing it based on results and not deliverables. And I didn't start breaking out, here's why this, and this. I would say, here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's what it costs. What are the results of switching that in terms of what I get for them and what I do for them rather than the line items? I increased my close rates about 23% and I got much, much better clients. So that's my personal experience doing that in the services context. Now let's talk about products, because that's another thing you can learn from. So in one of my e-commerce businesses, we increased prices 40% and we removed a feature grid. So we had a feature grid that said you get this and this and this, and here's the price. And so people in their head are saying, okay, well, I'm adding up what's that worth, what's that worth, what's that worth? And instead we just removed that feature grid and we focused on the results, the why of the purchase. And we jacked our prices 40% and we got 0 decrease in sales volume. The increase, in other words, was all profit. So take these lessons to heart. And if you don't believe me, it's likely because you haven't experimented enough with this in the real world to see it work. But once you do, once you implement this, you are never going to want to go back to begging for business and justifying what you're worth.